Hey there, you looking kinda cute. Please consider subscribing and check out our Patreon for more. Enjoy the video. When I was only 6 years old, some of the tough kids in my neighborhood bullied me because they didn't agree on who won a game of street kickball. When I got home that night, my shirt was torn to pieces. Ken, the leader of the tough kids in the neighborhood, told me not to say anything about what happened to my parents, or it would happen again. That night, my mom found out what had happened, and I told her everything. After I cleaned up and changed clothes that night, I was afraid to go to sleep. The next morning, when the sun came in my room, I was afraid to open my eyes. I got up slowly, wishing I would never have to leave my room again in my life. But my mother was already yelling at me to get down for a full 10-course breakfast that my father and I had to finish before we could go out the front door. After the big breakfast that morning, I did my best to help my mom out around the house by staying there. But she knew I was using it as an excuse to stay at home, and she got me out of the house by 8:30 a.m. I had my eyes shut and was half expecting to see all those tough kids standing in front of my house ready to bully me once more. But it was a pretty quiet morning. There were no kids on bikes in the neighborhood making clicking noises with their baseball cards. There were also no kids sitting on the sidewalk curb talking. Everything was too quiet. I slowly opened my eyes. It had been so quiet for so long that the morning light was so bright that it made it hard for me to see. I was still standing, my clothes were still in good shape, and I was still in front of my house. I wasn't in pain, and I wasn't hanging upside down from a tree. I was still taking in air. I was still on my feet. It seemed too good to be true, though. I turned around half expecting to see those kids ready to put a hood over my head from behind. But it was quiet. There were no kids hiding near my house, and nothing happened. I went around the house to the other side, but nothing happened to me. In fact, nothing happened at all. When I took my first step after standing for so long, I almost fell down. I told myself I could still walk as my first step brought me back to the solid driveway. I took my second step outside, then my third, then my fourth, and then I stopped. I stopped because I saw something that shouldn't have happened, couldn't have happened, or should I say, could never have happened in my wildest dreams or worst nightmares. The thing I saw in my front yard that stopped me in my tracks was something my neighbors only talked about in whispers for the next 20 years or so, and only when they had nothing else to talk about. The strange thing I saw at that moment was right in front of Ken's house, 2 houses down on the quiet street. Ken and his friends were all sitting in the front yard, talking, chatting, shouting, yelling, and smiling at each other. They were smiling and very happy to play dolls and tea party. I couldn't believe what I was seeing in front of me, so I rubbed my eyes with both of my hands several times. Those rough kids were sitting there, having a tea party and playing with dolls. Ken's long hair was brushed in the nicest way I could think of. He was dressed in his older sister's Sunday church clothes and had 2 well-done ponytails. As I rubbed my eyes again, I saw that all the other kids around Ken were also wearing girls' clothes. Some of them even had makeup on their faces, and a few had what looked like a light coat of nail polish on their fingers. They were being good little girls by playing, chatting, talking, and smiling. Then I heard a few dishes fall to the floor, so I turned my head toward the new sounds. I could see through the front windows that the mother of one of the tough kids was speechless in her kitchen. As she cried and ran out of the house to get her son out of the dolls and tea party, other women in the neighborhood heard the noise and went to the front doors of their own houses to see what was going on and see if it was something they could talk about and gossip about. As Ken's mother finally dragged him back inside, I could feel my mother standing behind me. The other tough kids were still playing mindlessly with their dolls and tea party until their working mothers got home from work that afternoon. When I was young, that's when I realized my mother wasn't normal. She wasn't just a normal person. She wasn't even human. All of those tough kids never bothered me again. They never changed, and they all moved out of the neighborhood within a month or 2 of each other. There was almost a year's worth of empty houses in the neighborhood, and I became the leader of the kids who stayed. When I was in school, weird but normal things happened to those who picked on me, usually after they had done something to me. No one talked about these changes out loud. Instead, they were always talked about quietly in a dark room, out of fear of something or someone. No one thought anything about me or my mother, though. My life in college was a real mess. I fell in love with Janet, a girl I met in my freshman English class. However, she was dating the football team's best receiver, so I couldn't be with her. When I went home for a holiday weekend and had a lot of different feelings, my mom told me there was nothing to worry about. Janet was waiting for me when I got back to my dorm room. It turned out that the football player she was dating worked at night in a club a few towns away from the university. Because of this, the school decided to kick him out of all school activities and classes. At first, I didn't understand what about this football player's job could make school officials and Janet so upset. Then Janet told me while she was crying on my shoulder and sitting on my mattress. She was crying and sobbing when she told me that the football player, whose name I think was Thomas, worked there as a girl and not a bodyguard. Now that she was single, we slowly began dating and got into a relationship. But like a lot of teen relationships, it didn't last. I didn't have a hard time getting a job after college. Even when I had bad bosses, they were soon fired, joined the Peace Corps, or made a big change in their lives. All of that happened right after I told my mother about how bad my bosses were. So I moved up in the company and got better jobs with better bosses. Everything was great. Life, work, and money. Then I met Betsy at work one day. I fell in love with Betsy the first time I saw her by the water cooler at work while I was messing around. She came right up to me, looked at me, and then handed me a note telling me to meet with the company president in 3 days. I didn't read that note until much later because I was always looking at Betsy. Her pretty lips, smooth hands, nice figure, long legs, high heels, and the really nice perfume or body spray she was wearing. That night, I called my mother and told her what the note said, but mostly I told her I was in love again, this time with someone who didn't want to spend any more time with me. My mother told me not to worry about the note because it might be a nice reward for all the good work I'd done so far at the company. She also told me not to worry about Betsy because she would soon want to stick to me forever. That night, I didn't believe a word she said, but I had a feeling she would be right again. As instructed, the meeting with the company president happened 3 days later and went well. I was given a raise and now work as his personal assistant. Well, I wasn't the only personal assistant working in his executive office. Betsy and Betty, his twin daughters, also worked there. Soon after, I asked Betsy to get coffee with me after work one morning. Of course, she said yes. I know you would want me to tell you that Betsy and I were together and happy to be with each other forever. Well, it didn't really happen like that. After 3 weeks, Betsy broke up with me, and Betty was mad at me for making her sister sad for so long. It looked like my mother's wise advice wasn't true after all. I told her that one night over the phone, and she got very angry. She was mad at me because I questioned her wisdom and power. She was angry that her only child didn't think she could fix everything. At least on the surface, everything was back to normal the next morning. We were back together like nothing had happened. Fast forward a couple of years, and now the time until my wedding is getting shorter and shorter. My father died in a car accident 8 months ago, and my mother died a week later after being in a coma for a week after the accident. You might say, wait a minute, what happened? Aren't you sad or upset? But they weren't really dead, hear me out. When I look at myself in the mirror, I can't believe what my mother did to me 8 months ago, or how far she was willing to go to make sure everything turned out the way she wanted it to be, or appear to be. Betty comes into the room I'm in and asks, "Are you all ready to go?" She is the maid of honor and is wearing a beautiful white chiffon dress that looks almost like a wedding dress. The shape of her body is as nice as the shape of the gown that covers it. The gown shows very little skin, but nothing was hidden from view. "Yes, Father," I tell Betty, who now has my father's soul and mind, thanks to the hard work my mother did 8 months ago. I look at myself again in the mirror. This is the last time anyone will see me as a single person. Betsy's father is waiting for me at the altar of the big church as I take my last steps to the altar. He smiles at me and then at Betty, who quickly walks to the door as the wedding coordinator told her to, and then slowly walks down the aisle as the maid of honor. Everyone will think I'm married and happy after this, but it won't really be like that, At least, not at first glance. I look at Betsy's dad, who is both laughing and crying at the same time. He takes my hand and we walk together down the aisle. My mother is now waiting for us to finish walking down the short distance that seems long and hard. She's all smiles as she looks at what she's done to get here. When Betsy's dad stops, he looks at me and then gives my mother my hand. As my mother holds my hand, she feels my hand and fingers with her other hand to try to calm me down. Yes, my mother is in my male body, but I'm now stuck in the beautiful body of Betsy. My mother told me that I had to do this when I woke up in Betsy's body 8 months ago. You might have thought I would scream, but I already knew there was nothing I could do, so I just took it like I always do. My mother was always in charge. On the surface, the wedding looks perfect. But nothing is what it seems because people have been switched around. My mother is putting the ring on my finger, and my father is crying next to me. I don't know if he's happy or sad that his only son is getting married to the woman he's been with for more than 800 years, but he's crying. All I can see now is my own face, smiling at me and telling me about all the terrible things I will have to go through for the rest of my life and forever. I now pronounce you man and wife, the priest says, sealing my fate for all time. I just can't believe it. I can't believe what's going on. It's all crazy, isn't it? My mom is a powerful witch with one unique ability. She can change any gender to the opposite, and that's how I became a girl. Thanks for watching. Be sure to check out Patreon for a lot more content and early access to YouTube videos.